Mr. Nader, maybe you could give us a word on the citizen summons.
Well, Congress has a lot of our power under the Constitution. We've delegated to it. There are 535 of them, 100 senators, 435 representatives, and they've abused that power. They have sold it to campaign finance contributors, big business. They've turned some of that power against the interests of the very people who sent them there. So I want to see a reversal of the dynamics. And instead of the members of Congress having these choreographed town meetings once in a while, I want to see the people have their own town meetings and summon the senators and representatives to their town meetings with the people's own agenda so as to instruct their senators and representatives what they want them to do when they go back to Congress. The tool is called the citizen summons. It's a formal summons, whereas the Congress has been derelict in this, whereas the Congress has opposed the public interest in that, etc. Now, herefore, the undersigned citizens of your state or your district summon you to a town meeting of our making to discuss the kind of changes we want for our country, and we will give you information ahead of time so you can do your homework, Senator or Representative, and when you come, prepare to stay for 2 or 3 hours and receive your instructions on your return to Congress. Now that reverses the dynamic and puts the muscle back into we the people, which is a preamble to the Constitution. Not we the Congress, not we the corporation, but we the people. And so it starts with a few dozen people back in the congressional districts, then it becomes several hundred, it could become several thousand. Believe me, they will come to your town meeting if you get up to 1,000 signatures, people who identify themselves in terms of their occupation, and even better, if they identify themselves as either Republicans, Democrats, Green, or Independents. Because when members of Congress are summoned by the people, and the people represent conservative liberals, that is an unstoppable political force. It's called the left-right alliance. And there are many major changes in our country that I outline in my book, Unstoppable, where conservatives and liberals support together, and that becomes an unstoppable force. So look up the citizen summons and get it underway. It's a lot of fun. You'll meet a lot of good people in your district, and win or lose, you will send a message to Congress. Stop fooling around with the hopes of the American people and their desire to make a better country for themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. My mother always thought that one person can make a difference for justice in our country, and we lived in a small industrial town in Connecticut, and it was ruined several times by the river that overflowed during floods. It's called the Mad River, and it took out half of Main Street in the Hurricane Diana caused flood in 1965, and there was significant loss of life. And of course, apartments, buildings, businesses were destroyed. And my mother said enough is enough. She'd been through about 3 of these floods in that town, and she learned that Senator Prescott Bush was coming to campaign through Winston on his way around the state of Connecticut. He's the grandfather of George W. Bush, and he had a reception, and she went to it and stood in line until she got up to him, and she shook his hand. They were all shaking hands and leaving, and she shook his hand, and she held on to his hand. She said, Senator Prescott Bush, our town needs a dry dam. It's had devastating floods, devastating property damage, loss of life. We want you to get the Corps of Engineers to build a dry dam north of the town, which would solve the flooding problem. And I want you to promise me that you will do that. You have a high stature in the Senate, and you have a lot of influence. And she wouldn't let go of his hand. And he kept nodding and nodding. And she said, I want you to promise me to do that. And he said, I promise I will do it. And he went back to Washington, and he kept his promise. We have a dry dam, and regardless of the storms and hurricanes, we've never had a flood situation since. So my mother's recommendation to people is when you meet politicians, instead of just engaging in niceties, how are you and how have you been, and just shake hands and not talk about politics, grab the politician's hand, tell that politician what you want, and don't let go of that hand until he responds or she responds.